Hello, everyone from all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is the sixth session of the Talking with Titans. We started at the peak of this pandemic when everyone was staying at home and trying to have connect with each other. So this we started in June, and today is the sixth session and then last session of the year. Happy New Year before to everyone. So today our guest is Dr. Arul Victor Suresh. Uh, so this event is organized by, as we said, Aquaculture Nutritionists Network, jointly with Jefo Nutrition Inc. And as well as today our guest, Dr. Victor Suresh, and we have Dr. Albert Tekken from Aquaculture Nutritionists Network and Ms. Jai from Jefo in the background. So as we know, Aquaculture Nutritionists Network started in 2011, and today we have about 2,000 members worldwide. And the mission was having a nonprofit platform for industry people as well as nutritionists, formulators, uh, our trade people, business owners who are interested in aquaculture, feed and nutrition, and feeding as well. And this platform grew to, I think, in the last 6 months with this event, we almost doubled our membership. So this is an amazing success for all of us, and hopefully we can continue to deliver, good programs uh, to deliver the updated information on aquaculture nutrition, the global status and future, where we are going, where we want to go. Uh, Coming to Jefo is a global leader of in non-medicated feed additives, established in 1982. So almost 38 years old, started by Mr. John Fontaine. Uh, I would say a visionary agrologist coming out of school, tried to help the farmers around him, and that's how it started. So the vision of Aquaculture Nutritionists Network is to help the end users, small and medium and large, and build the industry together. Which with Jefo's help, we started this event, and hopefully we can continue in future. Uh, Coming to Dr. Suresh, uh, I think he has a similar a journey similar to me, like bachelor from India, Tamil Nadu University, then masters. We are from the same institution from Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand, and he came to US for PhD in from Southern Illinois University, and I think it was a kind of mere consequence, right? Our last speaker was also from Southern Illinois University, Dr. J.C. Tushniski. Uh, in professional life, he is managing director of United Research based in Singapore. He was director of nutrition of an international research organization. He was also an editor, and I used to read that magazine, right? Formulation and Beyond. I don't know what happened to it. We will hear about that, right? When we chat. Also some commercial experience. Last but not least, currently he holds the position of I think he's the president of Society of Aquaculture Professionals, right? It's an India-based organization. And today's topic is formulation and product development. It's important because what we have seen the last few months during the COVID, the raw material price is increasing, right? Feed price is increasing, and farmers are suffering because farm gate price is not high. This is a big problem, especially in Southeast Asia and South Asian region. I think in Latin American region as well. So I think I have talked a lot, but I will ask Dr. Suresh to talk something about himself and his journey until today, right? What he is doing. We are almost like third quarter or fourth quarter, third quarter, I would say, I would hope third quarter of our life, right? So where are we and where we want to see and how we came to this point. Dr. Victor
Okay.
Suresh.
All right. Third quarter of life. I never thought of in those lines to be in the third quarter of life. But anyway, thank you, Kabir. I think this thing that you have done, I think it's a great thing. You know, the Nutrition Network, AAN. I think that's a fantastic idea, and you put this team into it, and I'm very grateful to you as well as your organization that is supporting you in doing this important thing. You know, in this age, we need a network like that. So, and you have organized a great series of presentations, and I feel, you know, the people who have spoken to you know, in this series before me are all true titans. You know, I'm just not, you know, a nutritionist. I'm more you know, somebody who worked on the industry side and learned almost all of it, you know, through my experience. So anyway, thank you for inviting me to speak in this, and I'm very happy to see Albert after many years. You know, Albert and I were involved in early stages of my career. You know, in my that second quarter of my career is where we were involved. It's good to see that. I also happen to know PJ from the past also. You know, we've been professionally involved, you know, at that point of time. So it's good to see you guys, and who isn't there, I don't know who else is attending this meeting. To everyone, you know, wherever you are, you know, like you said, good morning, good afternoon, you know, good evening. Greetings to everyone. About me, yeah, like just I said, you know, after I finished my PhD in Southern Illinois University, my PhD topic was not on a core nutrition area. I was more interested in the growth biology of fish, and that's my background. And then I entered into, you know, I finished the school in Illinois, just crossed the river, across to Missouri to start working for Ralston Purina, which then became sort of my university for nutrition, education and nutrition. Ralston Purina at that time was the top in pet food, but they had originally started in animal feed and livestock feed. And they're also pioneers in the aquaculture field. And so, you know, when I started my internship under Dr. Geo Chamberlain. He was, again, one of the great practical nutritionists that I know. And you know, on job, I learned a lot of things, and then a few years later, you know, we had some personal reasons to go back to my home country. Came back to India, and then I was a consultant. And in fact, the business that I worked for was bought by Cargill. And then Cargill wanted me to be a consultant, and also, you know, I started my consulting program with Bentolia, a feed additive manufacturer. And so it was sort of fun, you know, to be independent in Asia, in the home country, and do it. And then I sort of took, you know, I can call it a sabbatical in a way. When Joe Chamberlain, again, you know, he had this program in Brunei in domesticating black tiger shrimp, and I wanted to go back to, you know, hands-on research, but we also had a good consulting program. Had clients, you know, that ranged from Mexico to China, and then, you know, we built a program further, working a lot in Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia, and that sort of that program, you know, involved, you know, hands-on research for about 4 years, where we developed diets for monodon, tested a lot of different things in very controlled settings, you know, that I did not have previous experience in doing that. So again, it was a very good learning experience. So then when that project ended, I moved to Singapore to form my own company. Singapore largely because it's very convenient in terms of international travel, working with the clients and all of that. You know, it was very convenient. So I decided to go and, you know, do that in Singapore, and it's been almost a decade now. And you know, this is a very interesting field, you know, aquaculture, nutrition, and feed. Really professionally very fulfilling for me. So I'm glad that I'm here in this field, and I hope I can spend another decade in this third quarter.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suresh. I think the true titan, we have only one true titan here, which is Dr. Taken, right? Uh, I'm the kind of follower for both of you, but I will ask Dr. Taken Albert to say something. Like what is feelings, the journey that we are taking together. I think, and your journey as well. We know, but this event, talking with Titans, right? You were closely involved. It started with you. Even the Nutritionist Network started with you. If you think, like I asked, like, would you like to join? And so, what do you think? The initiatives and why we need to have this, right? Your opinion.
Yeah. I mean, my 2 cents worth is just that we're really fortunate to have Victor here. That in the end, what we wanted is to create a forum which is tailored to the needs of industry. And so what Victor is great about is that we all have an academic background, but his focus is always on working with feed companies, R&D, and that's the perspective that we need. Most of the speakers that we've had are people from industry. And at the end of the day, our job is to serve the farmer. If the farmer fails, we sell no feed. And those good feed companies are those that look at the that look at the farmer's needs and then tries to do their R&D to focus on that. And so I'm happy as hell that we have Victor here. I'm learning every day, and I think we all, we should all be open to learn new things and new ideas. So I'm happy to be here as usual.
Thank you, Albert. Now we have Punjai from Jefo, and she is working in the background to help us to make this session successful. And let Punjai present herself and then have some housekeeping stuff, right?
Hi, good evening and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. During the presentation, if you can have any questions, you can write down your question on the question box on your control panel on the sides. And then at the end of the session, Kabir will read out the questions and ask for the answer for you. And also, you can also download the handout on the handout session, which already attached the file. You can download it as well. And after the session, this session will be recording. And after the session, we will upload on our Jefo website. And you can also find in our Jefo YouTube channel as well. So enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
So I will try to switch, right, to presentation mode as well.
Yes.
My screen.
You can share the screen.
Sharing, okay, yes. Show main screen. Go to the other screen, okay. Sorry, it's coming. Don't worry, it's coming. Screen 2. Can you see the main now?
Okay, it's coming.
Okay.
Yep.
So we let the show goes.
Okay, can I get started?
Yes, please, sir. So the topic
Okay.
is,
Okay. So as we just were discussing, the topic of today is nutrition in practice. Nutritionists do the hard work in understanding nutrient requirements of the animals and what ingredients do in the feeds and all that in the diets. And they do all the work, and then we need to take that and then apply it. And that's the application, is in the form of formulation. But just formulation is it's just one part of various technical things that a practical nutritionist is called for to do. So he has a program in which you can say that formulation is the center of it, but there are many other activities around that. So we're going to talk about some of those. We don't have enough time to cover everything, but at least some of them, we'll be able to cover on what is getting done and how it is done and so forth. Due to a technical issue, I'm not able to run the presentation from my computer, and so Dr. Kabir has volunteered to do it from his computer, and this is a PDF, so it's going to be not the high quality that can be expected from a PowerPoint presentation, but we'll try to do the best we can. Dr. Kabir, if you could please move to the next one, it would be great. The one before that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is the one. So basically, the feed business, in its very, very simple terms, is taking, adding value to raw materials. So you take the raw materials, convert that into a feed, and that feed goes to fish. And that's where the value is, conversion of that raw materials to a feed that is appropriate for the fish that you're feeding. Next one, please. So there are market expectations, and people who have some experience in the feed industry would know that always, farmers are expecting to have a high quality feed. They want the feed to be having the highest quality, but the price should be the lowest. And in spite of our efforts to explain them that it is not possible to have the lowest price and give you the highest quality, that's what the market is expecting out of you. So you need to come up with strategies, that would address this innate requirement of the market. Next slide, please. Whereas internally in a feed company, in a feed organization, if the feed business has to make money, there are two players that are very important. This is one of the early lessons that I learned speaking to one of the managing directors of a company. It was a subsidiary of your company, and I had a conversation with him. And he was a young managing director called Harold Edwards, and I said, Harold, what does that help to in your business, makes you money? And he said there are two things. One is, I need to have a buyer, and he should know when to buy what ingredient at what price. That is one key criteria. And the other one is I need to have a good formulator who knows how to use the raw materials in the products. This is this is obvious because 80% of the cost of feed is of the raw materials. So if you look at the cost of the feed, there are several components to it. Definitely the cost of there are raw materials, and then there is operating cost, manufacturing cost. There is a selling cost and so forth. But 80% of the cost of the feed comes from raw materials. So it makes sense to have a buyer who knows how to do his job, and a formulator how to play along with him. So these two people are very critical in the success in the profit of a feed business. Next slide, please. So when you look at the exercise of formulation in feed companies, there are two ways in which it can be done. If you look at a very large feed company, these are large enterprises, you basically see that there would be a nutritionist, or maybe it's a panel of nutritionists, and then there will be a whole bunch of formulators. So there will be formulators for every location. This feed company is having multiple feed mills, and for every feed mill, there would be a formulator, sitting and then working on the command by this nutritionist. Then he formulates the feed for every day. But in smaller companies, you don't have that. The nutritionist himself could be the formulator. So you would see this kind of model predominantly either of these two models, where a nutritionist and formulator, or same person working as a nutritionist formulator, exercising formulation. And we want to look at what the roles of these people. Yes, please, the next one. Next slide, please. So we have the nutritionist. His role is that he designs products based on the species and the life state, the farming system, the method of farming, and climatic factors, market expectations. Then he come up with a nutritional and physical specification. So he's going to say this feed is going to have so much of crude protein, so much of digestible amino acids, and these are the fatty acids, whatever it is, phosphorus and trace minerals and all of that. But also he says that, okay, this is the feed that needs to be crumble less than 0.5 millimeter. This is a crumble more than between 0.5 and 1 millimeter, or a feed 2 millimeter or 5 millimeter or 10 millimeter, whatever it is. He defines the nutritional and physical specifications, and this nutritionist approves raw materials and then develop nutrient matrices and models. The nutrient matrices are important inside the formulation system to drive the system. So you basically say that, okay, if it is a soybean meal, what is the crude protein, and then all the derivatives, what are the different amino acids, what are the digestible amino acids, and so forth. And then the models, drive that thing, because the crude protein is going to change, and then all the derivatives need to change. And so this are derived in terms of models, which are driven by equations and so forth. And he also fixes the upper and lower levels of inclusion of these raw materials based on nutritional and feed processing factors. So the nutritional factors are one thing. So you say that, okay, in my feed, I want to have at least so much of marine proteins, at least so much of fish meal. Or you say that my feed needs to have so much of wheat flour in order to be able to help the feed processing. So all these are then determined by the nutritionist, and he provides feeding recommendations, or how to use the feed. He drives the R&D and the field technical service teams to conduct trials, report field performance of the feed, and so forth. Now, formulator, on the other hand, he is the executor. So he basically takes these matrices that are given by the nutritionist and executes them. They to account for variations in the quality of the raw material. So in that sense, he's working with the lab, the QC that is analyzing the ingredients, and then saying that, okay, today we received the soybean meal. That's about, it's supposed to be 46, but we got a 46.8% protein in our soybean meal that was received today. And then he factors in the cost and availability of raw materials in arriving at the formulas. So basically, the store's manager tells him, today we are going to, use a soybean meal that was received 10 days ago, and that soybean meal had, X amount of protein, and there was the cost of it. And it's not just the present cost, but also even in the future cost. So he gets this information that meat and bone prices are going to increase in 2 months. So what do we do? What do we do with the meat and bone meal in your hand? And should you buy or should you hold? Maybe sometimes you even sell your meat and bone meal because it has become more valuable than when you bought it, and then you have other alternatives in your store that can replace it. So all these decisions, need to be made by the formulator, of course, in consultation with the management. He takes responsibility for gross margin management, which means that the management is telling him the cost of your formula will be so much because it is in relation to the price of the feed. So he takes responsibility for managing it, and if there's any problem, then he goes into a round of consultation. He organizes the audits of the formula. This is very, very important because this is something frequently missed by some organizations, auditing of the formula, because the constraints either for nutrients or for ingredients that are set by a formulator is to manage a particular situation. So you are saying that I cannot have more than this ingredient in this formula because I don't have enough of it in my warehouse. So I'm limiting my ingredient, but it's just costing me money. Now, if I don't change that constraint when my raw material situation gets back up, I'm imposing a cost on the formula that is unnecessary. So it is very important that an audit of the formula is made, especially with the constraint analysis. So every minimum and maximum that is set in the formula need to be seen, questioned, why it is there, and can we revise it? Especially those that are costing money. Of course, today's modern formulation software gives you the options to look at those costs and warn you that there are issues with this particular setting. So you can review the setting, revise it if necessary. And of course, then he advises purchasing on the raw material requirements and prices. So he says that, okay, look, in this current situation, you go ahead and buy corn gluten meal at this particular price. And if he gives a price and then he says, okay, at that price, this ingredient is not working out, negotiate to reduce the price, or look for an alternative supplier, or maybe look for an alternative ingredient. All these things will be inputs will be provided by the formulator. So just wanted to distinguish, what the formulator does and what the nutritionist does. Next slide, please. So in doing all this nutritionist formulator has to have expertise in certain areas. One is he has to know the nutrient requirements of the species in their life stage, the farming system, farmer objectives. That's very important. It's not just giving a feed blindly to a farmer, but knowing what he wants. Does the farmer need a good growth, a good FCR, or maybe a resistance to disease? What is that the farmer wants to have? And understanding that then would help us to come up with a feed that will meet the farmer objectives. Raw materials in terms of composition, digestibility, minimum and maximum values of these raw materials that can be used. Feed processing technology, because feed processing technology is going to put a limit on what can be and what cannot be used. And again, it's a huge variable, just like raw material. Setup to setup, it would vary. Even if you look at just pelleting technology, there are many variants within that. Or if you look at extrusion technology, again, there are many variants inside that. So a nutritionist or the formulator has to have a very keen understanding of feed processing technology. Additives, different additives, what they are made of, what they do, how they work, what would be the dosage, ideal dosage, variables in the dosage, and how do you arrive at a suitable dosage for you. And the safety of these additives are important. And finally, going outside of the nutrition area, the nutritionists also need to understand what would be the effect of a diet on the water quality. What would be the effect of a diet on fish health? What would be the effect of that diet on the fish quality as food? He has to have a good knowledge in that particular area. So these are, I would say, basic minimum areas that a nutritionist formulator needs to have. Next slide, please. So formulation as an exercise is the process of taking a very highly varying ingredients into a diet which has constant nutrients. So that's what, if you want to summarize formulation in the simplest form, it's taking that highly variant ingredients, converting that into a feed with constant nutrients. So so not only we have several, there are hundreds of ingredients So there again, there one level of variability, but also within each ingredient, there will be numerous factors that affect its composition and its quality. So, so it's a lot of different factors are floating around there, and then you need to make sure that the formulator makes sure that the diet has the guaranteed levels of nutrients in the feed all the time. Next slide, please. So what are the sources of nutritional variation in the ingredients? You have plant origin ingredients, and these plant origin ingredients are going to have the nutrients varying, their quality varying depending on where they are grown, the climatic factors there, the kind of cultivars that will be being used, the processing of the ingredient. You are extracting the fat, or you are pre-processing it into maybe an extruded ingredient. There are multiple ways to process an ingredient. So all of this would have an effect on the quality of the ingredient, particularly its nutritional factors. And once you store an ingredient, it undergoes changes. It can be subjected to molds and other things. And those also will have an impact on the nutritional quality of the ingredient. I have one of my clients is in Saudi Arabia, and something like an extreme climate, whatever you put in there, it keeps, it starts drying the moment it arrives in the warehouse. And so you can say, if I draw a sample today, after I receive the raw material, versus in a month later, it's going to be a different composition, largely because it's under storage. It has just changed. So, so we need to factor this in, when we are looking at the ingredients. We have animal origin ingredients, a little bit more complicated. The location of the ingredient, the seasonality of the ingredient. When we say fish meal is not the same year round. The fish undergoes a lot of changes. It undergoes maturity, its diets in the ocean changes, and depending on the season. So fish meal's composition, particularly its fatty acid composition, would change with season. So we need to know what we are getting, when we get something like a fish meal. The species, of course, again, this is the case of the marine protein meals. Sardine is going to be different from an anchovy to a tuna byproduct meal. Based on the species, the composition of the fish meal would vary. And if this is from a farm source, dietary history of the animal is will also going to change. If you have a chicken, that chicken is raised on a diet which had palm oil as the main source of fat, versus soybean oil, which is the source of fat. If they are fed on different diets, their fatty acid composition, the fatty acid composition of the poultry byproduct meal is going to be different. It's going to be like the chicken which was fed this given fat. So there is going to be a variation there. Freshness at the time of processing. This is an extremely important one in case of the animal processing. The freshness will make a big difference in the quality and in the digestibility of the raw material. Method of processing, how you cook and dry, particularly drying. If you are drying at a very high temperature, you're going to lose a lot of digestibility. If you dry it at a lower temperature, then its digestibility will be high. So we need to understand these factors. Again, just like the plant origin raw material, animal origin raw materials also undergo change in storage, particularly with respect to oxidation and things like that. They will undergo changes in storage. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just an example. This is the data that I recently got showing, the kind of variability. You think that a corn is a corn, it has a 8.5% protein, but it's not. You look at each of the consignments that are received, and it can be as high as 11% in protein to about 6% in protein. So what do we do by assuming that it's a 8.5%? corn, and then you are getting a 6.1% protein corn, your values will be wrong if you assume that they are having a constant value, or if you say that, it's 11% and you're still using 8.5% crude protein, then you are giving away protein. And so this is the reason why it is important that every batch of raw material that is being received, needs to be tested for important nutrients. Next one, please. So when you look at these nutrients, there are things that you can fairly easily analyze in a lab. A batch of raw material arrives, and if you have an NIR, within a few minutes, you're going to know what is the approximate composition of that ingredient. Or if you have a wet chemistry, if you're depending on wet chemistry, it probably take half a day, maybe 3/4 of a day to know, what would be the approximate composition of the raw material. But then, from this, there are other derivatives, and then we need to understand that, because the moisture, it impacts everything. So if you make a mistake in moisture, it's going to affect all other values that you'll be using in the formulation. Protein is going to impact amino acids, and of course, the digestible amino acids, and it's going to affect energy. So and then fatty acids, phospholipids, sterols, energy, all of this will be affected by the fat. Any variation in fat would mean that those other things would also change. When there is a change in the ash content, the macro and micro minerals, would be impacted by it. And also, ash is a very good indicator of sometimes, adulteration and things like that, to see if any sand was added and things like that. So again, it's an indicator of nutrient quality, but also it also drives, the other things. So we need to be aware of that, when ash level goes up, why, and then if it is purely as a matter of these components coming from, say, bone, then your mineral levels need to be adjusted according to that. Next one, please. So a practical formulator faces this thing, this milieu where there are known knowns, there are known unknowns, then there are unknown unknowns. So so what do you do when there are known knowns? I would say, hey, perfect, let's go ahead, this is a good situation to be in. There are known unknowns. Okay, so for some species, you may not have the amino acid requirements. For some species, you may not have a vitamin requirement. For some species, you may not have a trace mineral requirement, and so forth. So then you say that, okay, I'm going to adapt whatever I know from a related species, or even if there is no related species, maybe even you can look at what is being done in a species like chicken, and then take that value and adapt that value. But then there are unknown unknowns. We do not know what we do not know, and then at that time, we just have to guess widely and then trust your guts, and that's what formulators do on a daily basis, is to guess widely and trust the guts. Okay, next one, please. So what are the resources available for an aquaculture nutritionist and a formulator to depend on? And so a few years ago, somebody asked me to make a presentation, and I looked at this journal, Aquaculture Nutrition, and I looked at the number of papers that have been published in a 10-year gap. What was it in 1998, 2008, and 2018? And you can see that the number of papers have gone up. I mean, the nutrition research, we see a lot more output, from the aquaculture nutrition done in the area of aquaculture nutrition, particularly from China in the last 10 years. There is an explosion of papers, that come from China. So now you have a lot more information than what you previously have. So, which is a good thing, that you get to know more. Yeah, and next slide, please. Okay, so what are the different species that are targeted in public research? So again, when we counted these papers, looked at on what species they were done, and what we realized is that 50% of these published papers are on the top 5 species, and these 5 species groups, the carps, tilapia, catfish, shrimp, and salmonids together, they account for more than 70% in volume and value of the global production of these 5 species groups. And so 50% of the work is coming from that area. And then if you look at the other 50%, or about 30 to 40 species that comprise the rest of the fed species. So the other, I would say about maybe 20% of the volume and value come from other species. But 50% of the work is done on those species. So there is a bit of a dilution in what you can do, because you have so many species to cover. And it's also important that we do this work, because tomorrow, these species could become an important species. So this is the nature of the work. So sometimes what we like to see as in terms of priority, we don't get to see, largely because of this diluted effort in the aquaculture nutrition area. Next slide, please. Okay, so then when we look at what are the different areas that are being researched upon, you see that we have ingredients, we have nutrient requirements and health. I wanted to take enzyme because that's an area of emerging interest, so we covered enzymes in it, and then other areas. And if you see that a lot of work in the early days was done on nutrient requirements, and today it has come down. The amount of work that is done on ingredient has gone up, and this is the way it should be. That we need a lot more work on ingredients, and also due to the concerns in the health of the animal, we see more and more work done on the health aspect of the animal in relation to their diet. And again, on enzymes, there is more work done than in the past. So this indicates that we are on the right track in terms of where research is conducted. Next slide. Okay, so today there are a lot of not just journal articles, but a lot of books. This is right down from my shelf. These are some of the essential books that I have on my shelf for frequent references, and you can see that we have this NRC 2011 nutrient requirements of fish and shrimp. I think it's due for another revision now, because the field is a lot more information gets added now. But then today we are dependent on the digital resources. We have this database, amino acid database by Evonik. That's a fantastic resource for practical nutritionists and formulators. There are also very good online resources. We have data on common feed ingredients, which is on the Feedipedia, and we have this database, which came out as a nice little book, and I'm very glad that they have put that into an online resource now. The INDRA data on feed ingredients, feedtable.com. There is also this database on nutrient requirements of aquatic species and ingredient composition. This was started as a U.S. soybean board initiative. I think they started when they were American Soybean Association, largely as a Southeast Asian source of data, but it's also a very useful. It's still a work under development, and so is aquaculture nutrition as a whole. But it focuses on aqua feed ingredients specifically, because the others are general ingredients. These focus on some of the specific aqua feed ingredients, like for example squid meal, which will not be commonly covered in other databases, but you would see it covered here. And then they have changed it a little bit. This is the latest location at which this database is there. and it's free for all. So you just need to register and then get access to it. These are very useful online resources that I find myself using from time to time. Next slide, please. So we were looking at these different knowledge resources for the nutritionist and formulator. We have public data, we have owner contract research, we have suppliers and customers. These are also very important source of knowledge for a formulator and nutritionist. Next slide, please. We already looked at the public data, so we're going to look at the other things. Next slide, please. Okay, so why do we need our own research? And so we are shifting gears from talking about the practical aspects of formulation to practical aspects of R&D. One is validation, validating in the real world environment, and asking, are we going to decide on 1 million tons of an ingredient based on 1 bag of the ingredient? And which is typically the case, many times when we do research. So we need to keep on validating, what we do, and also, the effect of processing. A lot of public research on aquaculture nutrition is done on feeds that are not processed in the industrial way. So we need to look at that, and farm conditions. Moving from a tank. Or an aquarium tank, or a bigger tank, whatever it is, from that tank to the pond, like how does it work? So we need to validate things in the real world. So a lot of time, checking it out in the real world. Variability. We talked about the ingredient variability. What is the extent of variability? What is causing it? It's an area on its own. Requires a lot of resources to understand. Interactions, of course, it's not just a single factor, but when you put all these ingredients together, process them into a feed, and then giving to a farmer, giving to a multitude of farmers, who are all using the feed for different things, we need to understand the interaction. So there is a need for own research in this particular area. And finally, we need new products and applications, product improvements, new product development, and specific applications. All of this would not be possible without having an approach for our own research. We just cannot fully depend on public research, to get our knowledge. We need to have our own efforts to do it. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm giving, this is one of my clients, and I'm putting the slide on for different reasons. One reason is that this company has given a complete freedom and resources to do research, and sometimes it is a constraint. People look at the cost and they say, no, we don't want to do it, or maybe we'll do a limited kind of research and that's it. But this is a company, so when we started this business about 11 years ago, we wanted to put some cages, and we said we'll put a battery of cages in the pond nearby, for testing the feeds. We can do a lot of replicated testing in these cages, which was just outside the factory. Then eventually we went to build a facility inside, and I have some pictures. Next one, please. Okay, I think we are a little bit behind, so let me try to speed up things. So basically, for a feed company, the knowledge program should have an ingredient analysis program, which is to require lab analysis for selected ingredients, for detailed nutrients on a predetermined frequency. And so this is going to help us to improve our knowledge of the ingredient. Feed processing. For testing formula revisions and new products, it's very expensive to do it in the real production environment. So if you have a pre-feed processing lab, it's going to help you. A wet lab, where you can conduct controlled trials for assessment of growth, feed intake, and digestibility. You have field data and trials. Again, having a systematic approach to collect the information from the field so you can review it. And so where you are observing growth, survival, FCR, and field, disease resistance from the field. And we want to have contract research. Sometimes we want to work with, a specific topic cannot be addressed in your own lab, so you just give your work to outside lab and ask them to do that work for you. And can be done with public and private institutions. Today, a lot of good private institutions are coming up for conducting research. So unlike 10, 15 years ago, today we have great private labs, that can do the lab, that can do contract research. And finally, collaborative development with suppliers, customers, and institutions, where there is a synergy between the facilities researchers and other resources to reach common goals of interest. So in the following slides, I'm going to give you some examples of how this is done. And like I said, like to speed up. And this is the pilot feed plant that we have at the Growell feed, where you could make 10 kilos of feed if you want per hour, or you can make 200 kilos of feed per hour. In contrast with, you take the big equipment, the production equipment, the minimum there is 5 tons per hour. So you cannot do a lot of testing there without, wasting awful lot of raw materials. So having a small setup like this is going to be very, very helpful. The cost of these setups have come down today, so it's more affordable today than ever in the past. Next slide, please. This is the Global Innovation Center that we built, and basically, we have tanks and inside this building, labs for analysis and things like that. So the next slide will show you the inside of it. Next slide, please. We have a battery of tanks here. These are fiber tanks, and basically, we have what we call as a clear water system. This is a complete RAS. We also have a system in which we take the water to the outside, and this is all inspired by this work done by the Oceanic Institute, where Albert played a major role. To use an outdoor pond, where all the processes of recycling happen, and also very similar to pond conditions, and then that is then comes into the tank. So we could do the control trial with a common water source, which is also doubles up as a waste treatment place. We have a few fish in there in the green water system. We don't feed them, so they basically clean up the system. So it's we have two kinds of system, and the choice of the system depends on the kind of trial that you want to do. If you want to do something where you want to see only the effect of the diet, then you do it in the RAS, in the clear water system. When you want to see how it would be in a green water system, then you use the other system. So next one, please. And the outdoor system, you saw the cages in the pond, and we found that the shrimp Vaname is so tolerant to low salinity that the outdoor pond had only like 2 ppt salinity, and shrimp was growing great. So we could use the outdoor cages to grow the shrimp also. Yeah. Next one. But mostly, we grow fish, and in those outdoor cages, species like Pangasius, which are not very, you cannot grow them beyond a certain size in the tanks. It's kind of difficult to grow the Pangasius in tanks, but they grow extremely well in cages, high density, and they take the feed fantastic, and they grow fast, and we could do well replicated trials using Pangasius in those cages. Yeah. Next one, please. Okay, so sometimes all these systems are helpful, but recently, about a couple of years ago, we embarked on this new venture where we wanted to develop the farming system as well as feeds for snakehead. And so you take the snakehead and put it into the cages. Within a few weeks, they somehow make a hole in the cages and then they escape. They don't like to be in the cages, so you cannot use a cage system to test these fish. And so you have to do it in the pond. And fortunately, the company was, willing to do that. So we actually did the work in the ponds. And the next slide would show you a picture of the pond. These fish, if you wean them right, they become, they can take take the feed quite easily. So so you can give them floating feed, and they can consume the feed. Then I have the next slide. Was supposed to be a slide, was supposed to be a video. I was going to show you that. Unfortunately, because of this technical difficulty that we have today, I'm not able to show you the video. Where you see the fish jumping out of the water to grab the feed. This is first generation, not even domesticated. This is wild brood stock and then spawned and raised, and so has not even gone through the domestication in this particular case. And now we have done the breeding and all of that, but at the time, these particular fish were not domesticated, but still, they go out and aggressively consume the feed. So sometimes, a lab setup is not going to work. You have to go to the pond and do the work. That's the point I would like to draw. Next one, please. Okay, so we talked about the institutional collaboration. India may be known as a tropical country, with its hot weather and stuff. But in the mountains, we have rainbow trout, and which is growing. And today, our original strains, I think they were taken from California. They went to the UK, and the British took them to India and stocked them in the mountainous lakes and reservoirs. But today, there is a resurgence in that, and people are now bringing eggs from Europe, from Denmark, to grow the fish in India. So so the Directorate of Cold Water Fisheries Research is an institution that specializes in this, and they have a bunch of young nutritionists, who are working on this, and then they have the fish, and we have the feeds. And so we decided to put the two together and work on the development of high performance feeds for trout in India. So this is an example in which you join forces, you take the synergies of both the parties, to develop specific solutions for the market requirements. Next one, please. Okay, in addition to that, we also work with, like I said, work with suppliers and customers, and basically, as anyone in the feed industry knows, there are many products that are being offered to improve the health of the animal, and then so we wanted to develop a functional feed for shrimp a few years ago, and there was no way we could do this trial in our lab, because we don't have a system in which we can induce and challenge diseases or pathogens in the animals. So the only way we could do it is in the field, where farmers are facing problems every day. So we created this different variants with, working with our suppliers to get the products, working with them to know what would be the good dosage, and what is the previous work, in this particular with this particular ingredient, whether it is promising, and then then selecting the ingredient that can go into the feed. And then we did the field test. We made about 10 forms per ingredient per feed, and we also included some placebo feeds as control. And then we sent out, and then we tracked the health of these farms. So our technician would go in there and then look at the health of the animal, how the culture is progressing, and so forth. So farms that had high problems, white gut or white feces, and also high risk areas for WSSV, we did that. So then, looking at the data, we saw very clearly that the animals respond to certain ingredients, but not to others. And for example, all of our placebo feeds, we had, I think, like 20 farms. There was no improvement when they got hit by the white feces. So we know that what product worked, what didn't, and then based on that, we put together this product called NutriBio 15. So for managing disease problems in the field. The next slide, please. Yeah, so this is what our technicians would observe, and they would take a picture on their mobile phone and send it across, to report things that on a real-time basis. Next slide, please. And I've noticed that it crosses over. Now we are in the process of developing a novel feed. This is under R&D. We are not commercially started selling the product, but we included many of the principles that we learned from the grow-out feed to this novel feeds, and then we did a trial comparing established feeds on the novel side. So we had a commercial benchmark 1 and 2. And we found that, at the end of it, we found that the PL survival was far higher. This is only from PL 1 to 14, not involving the earlier stages, but just they were on a common feed till then. And then we switched them over to this different feeds at PL 1 to 14. We just did better than what we expected, very high levels of survival when these principles are included. So we know that, these are transferable. Next slide, please. So, we are nearing the conclusion. So, the product development, is dependent on, what is publicly available, in terms of published literature and reviews and so forth, combined with private and in-house research, and added to collaborative work. Then, these are great tools in making sure that, we are able to develop a product. Next slide, please. So just as a conclusion, I would like to summarize. So there are diverse areas of knowledge that is required for effective formulation of aqua feed. The most critical one is the knowledge of ingredients. This is, I can say that this is my personal opinion, is that the knowledge of the ingredients is the most important one, because it's one is it's acutely short. Secondly, the one that I talked to you earlier, 80% of the cost is from the ingredients. So, purchasing them at the right time and right price, and utilizing the ingredients optimally, using a good formulation system determines the profitability of any feed enterprise. Creating and refining ingredient nutrient species matrices and equations are key to deploying ingredient knowledge in formulation programs. Otherwise, it's all in, out there in our minds, but how do you take it and keep on looking at your, matrix for an ingredient and see if the values are right, and looking at your equations, see if those equations are expressing things right, and then reviewing, refining based on the data that we get is extremely important in capturing the knowledge of the ingredient into the formulation program. There is a wealth of public information for building an ingredient database. Like I said, there are public databases available, but if you want to build your own database, then there is a lot of information available out there. And you can supplement that with your own program, where you have like I said, a routine analysis, a frequent and routine analysis of commonly used ingredients for, like for most of the known nutrients that can be analyzed in the lab. If you could do that, you could do some digestibility in your lab, and again, integrate that data. You would have an outstanding ingredient knowledge program. Collaboratively work with suppliers and customers. Here, no one has all the answers, but the more the pieces you collect, you will solve the puzzle sooner. So, so we need to trust our suppliers. We need to be open and be willing to work with the customers. Sometimes, it requires you to make certain compromises and things like that, but ultimately it'll be very, very rewarding when we do that. Next slide, please. It's about the R&D requirement for product development, not just for new product development, but also for improving your products and developing specific applications. I would very highly recommend having an in-house R&D program, and because you have immediate access to live animals, and then you can test and retest. So when I work with the supplier, sometimes they come in or disappointed, when I say that their product does not work. And I tell them, look, one test doesn't mean everything. We can test and retest, to see how it works. And then I also say, when I ask you for a sample, you send me 1 kilo of your sample. Now I'm making a decision on your ingredient based on this 1 kg. It's not fair. And but when you have your own facility, then you have the luxury of doing it. That when you believe in something, you can test and retest things. So I would highly recommend that feed manufacturers consider, and even ingredient suppliers should also consider an in-house R&D for the same reason. Universities and research institutions can be valuable resources for R&D. But then the chances that a single institution is going to meet all your requirements is going to be very, very remote. Even including yourself. I mean, our own R&D is going to give all the answers, so we have to go out. And similarly, we need to recognize that, whatever famous university is not going to have all the answers for you. So you need to know like who's doing what in a good manner to be able to coordinate and get the work done in the right place. And maybe a project can be broken down into pieces and then given to different places to get done. And finally, we need expertise and infrastructure capabilities, not just in nutrition and feed, but also in critical areas, related critical areas. Health, water quality is important, environment is important. We need to have capabilities, to do that also. So those are my take-home points today. So that, brings us to the end of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suresh, on the presentation. And I will ask Dr. Albert to join us for the Q&A session. I will try to stop sharing and then go back to our discussion. We have some interesting questions today from, I think, first one from Dr. Waldemar Rossi Jr. from Kentucky State University. And the question is on mycotoxin, right? How is the industry dealing with mycotoxins, and to what extent mycotoxins have impacted the feed industry in your view? We can go with Albert first or Dr. Suresh first. You can choose, either of you.
Yeah, I think let me give it a shot first. And my assessment is that the mycotoxins are taken more seriously by the livestock feed industry. It's extremely, I mean, they take very, very keen interest on mycotoxins and their control by the poultry, swine, and dairy or cattle ruminant feed industries take it more seriously than aquaculture feed ingredients, largely because I think one is, we do not know to a full extent, the impact of mycotoxins. Secondly, the high variability. We see that species to species it differs, the susceptibility to mycotoxins. And we don't see a great deal of evidence also in the effect of mycotoxins. It happens occasionally in certain very sensitive species like maybe trout. You would see that happening, but things like pangasius, for example, the studies show that they have a very high tolerance for aflatoxins, an unbelievable high level of tolerance for aflatoxins. So I don't think we are taking that seriously, and I think we should. That's what I think.
Albert?
No, I mean, I think we should take them seriously. I mean, there are over 500 different mycotoxins that we know, of which aflatoxins are one of the ones which are, which are highly toxic. The thing is that most of our ingredients, especially our plant ingredients and also many of our animal ingredients, are contaminated with mycotoxins. Most of the mycotoxins have a negative effect on the immune system of all species. They also have effect on gut structure and permeability. Some mycotoxins actually affect the tight junction in the intestine, and then the toxins from the bacteria can go straight through. And so I think we have to be very careful. But like you say, it's not on a radar screen of most nutritionists at the moment, because really there's not much information out there that's been done. And if, you know, and so, but it really is, you know, and especially those ingredients that we ship from one part of the world to the other part of the world. I mean, the mycotoxins, like Victor was saying, you know, that with storage, things happen. And one of the things is are the increase in mycotoxins. And if we think about things like using sweepings or dust from the processing facility, these things are very, very important. So I think mycotoxin is an area that's that needs a lot more attention, and especially by the researchers.
And also the weather storage conditions can affect the mycotoxin level in raw material as well as in the bag, the feed bag. Next we can, if you look at the history of fish feeding and nutrition, right? 70s we are using trash fish, you know, or poultry offals and straight to the pond. And then coming to 1980s, 85, it was a farm-made aqua feed around 85, 90. We started making some feed on farm, and then it was kind of Peter Edwards, right? Making compost of the kind of, it's like feed was like supplemental, right? At the time. And then if you look at the history of feed manufacturers, right? 1982, Tongwei started, right, with the owner started with a what do you call, semolina machine, right? A semolina
Yeah,
machine.
mincer.
Yeah, and then going to the farmer ponds and then making feeds, and that's how it started, 1982, 1983. And then, as Dr. Suresh discussed in his presentation, right, 2010, we work on raw materials, ingredients, uh, nutrient requirements we are doing since 2000, 1990s. What would be the next, right? We are in 2020. What would be the next, right? I think we are at a crossroad in terms of aquaculture nutrition, right? We have been doing raw materials, ingredients, requirements. What would be the next, right? We can talk. I will throw this question to both of you.
This is a very, very broad question, you know.
Right. You look at the publications, right? You saw those graphs. You see the trend. I'm just trying to focus on those trends, right? Where we are going, or where we should be going.
Well, I mean, I think where we would like to see going, at least, you know, we see a lot of work on, say, for example, nutrigenomics, and I would like to see, you know, real application information coming out of those approaches. We have been speaking about them for the last 10 years, and now I would like to see they producing data that is usable. So probably, you know, something that combines bioinformatics, where we look at the effect of either ingredients or nutrients on the performance of the animal. Can we check the performance of an animal within a short period of time, not waiting for 8 weeks or, you know, a 16-week trial? Can we get information, you know, within, you know, a week of feeding, maybe, you know, 2 weeks of feeding, something like that? Can we get information? I think, you know, that is where, you know, I'm seeing that, you know, the possibilities of, you know, which would also be very, very helpful for us, you know, to have quick feedback, so, you know, we can make our decisions. Maybe, you know, even to the point, you know, we could have them, and rather than, you know, through lab analysis, in vitro assessments, you know, maybe you could combine in vivo assessments and these tools, you know, so, and incoming ingredient can be analyzed. I mean, this is just dreaming, but I'm saying if that's possible, you know, that would be great. And but one area is where we're going to see important work to be done is how diet affects the quality of fish as a human food. That I really see that, you know, as having a great promise, and I'm already seeing you know, some initiatives on that side. How do we you know, impact the flavor of the fish, or the nutrient content of the fish? based on the data that we provide, how do we optimize it for markets? This this is already being done to some extent, but it's going to be an area where a lot more effort needs to be sent. And I see that even on the private side, people are taking interest in it and going in that direction.
Albert?
No, I agree, especially with the last point, where we basically can tailor the nutrient profile of the fish to the consumer. Like we have eggs and milk with DHA added, we can also do the same, with our farm species. And like you say, we have a good story to tell. But I think the future on feeds depends very much on the farming system. If it's a flock-based system, then we have to start doing our R&D, like Victor showed. He has a clean water system, but also he has a green water system which he can apply to a pond system. But if we're going to have a flock system, we also need to have a part of our R&D has to also change. But also we have the move in many countries for indoor, for RAS system. And so in the end, the thing about aquaculture is like agriculture. We can have urban, we can have, there's so many different types of culture systems, but we have to tailor our nutrition and feed research to a particular farming system and to a particular density. I mean, as I said, at the end of the day, it's the farmer that has the last say, and what Victor showed the importance of is the importance for feed companies to invest money into R&D, to do work today for tomorrow. But at the end of the day, it's the performance of the feed on the farm and the costs per kilo of production that in the end will dictate whether one farmer buys from one company or the other. And so a smart farmer is a farmer that also does not buy just 100% on one feed company. A smart farmer will have a certain number of ponds or tanks where they could test, new feeds, new customers, just because always we have to innovate, always we have to try and we have to, reduce the costs.
If I summarize your responses, both of yours, it's like first one is basically we need a shorter period to test. So when Dr. Suresh was talking about this, I was thinking about could like gene expression, looking at the gene expression, particular type of feeding and gene expression at particular life stage could be a quick indicator of what is happening if we know what specific gene to look at, right? And then tailor-made feed, looking at the table, looking at the consumers, a specific feed, as well as targeting a specific farming system. Could be bioflock, a special feed for bioflock, targeting feed for RAS, right? It's a lot of companies are trying to develop RAS feed as well, right? Another question related to this is, I think it was in my mind, we are using a lot of chemicals in pond today, right? Could we have, because this is causing a lot of problems in environment and also consumer health, if you think, could we have feed-based solutions? I think we can. It's just the price, because consumer looking for cheaper feed, but they're spending a lot of money on farm, right? For chemicals and additives, and even in Vietnam, amino acid minerals. Could we have this solution and train or educate our farmers that this is a little bit expensive, at the end it is cheaper solution? Both of you.
I know, but it's not. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Albert.
No. I mean, what I'm getting at is not just farmers. Victor talked about, we have our different plant-based ingredients, and also we have our animal ingredients. For both sectors, they use chemicals by the buckets, whether it's herbicides, pesticides, antibiotics, many different things. And so we also, it's not just the aquaculture sector that, yes, on farm we have to be careful what we use, but also many of the ingredients already come with a lot of baggage, and we have to be careful, how we select them and how we use maybe solvents to get rid of those contaminants.
Dr. Suresh.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I mean, we have come a long way, first of all. And if you look at, for example, India is the second largest producer of aquaculture, products. I mean, mainly fish. And we didn't even have formulated manufactured feed for the fish about 12, 13 years ago. And that just converting them from using the raw materials as such to a manufactured feed itself made a big difference in terms of water quality, because now your FCR is very low because of that, very little waste being produced. The ponds are cleaner, so you don't have to use many of the additives that you would.
I think we lost. We lost.
We just lost Victor.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. So so issues like that, that affected our environment, is improved today because of the improvements in just converting from a mash feed to a manufactured feed.
Okay,
So
sorry.
Yeah.
So we have 7 more minutes. We'll take a
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Albert, you was going to say something. Go ahead.
No, I mean, a good example is a country like Vietnam. Because at the end of the day, for the farmer, the biggest cost is feed. And so in Vietnam, for example, the government sets rules and guidelines on how you manufacture feeds, but also on the nutrient levels and also on the contaminant levels as well. It's really, a good example. But it's one approach. Other countries, I know Victor could probably talk about it, but other countries have a different approach. And the problem is that because still in Asia, which is 90% of the production, aquaculture is still very much small scale as opposed to other parts of the world. And so the difficulty is that you have many small scale farmers that use chemicals that maybe they shouldn't, and in the end, this affects the whole industry, so we have to be careful. So the issue is very important. But at the end of the day, it's up to the government to legislate that. But it's like some countries do, some countries don't. Anyway, sorry, that was my
we need a
last
larger.
point.
We have one question from our audience, Mohammed Afuzia, about this is a generic question, but you can answer or you can answer generally. What is the best feed formulation software? So you can recommend if you want, but if you don't know, I don't think you want to recommend any specific software. But I don't use, in my case, I don't use any software. I use Excel, linear program based Excel sheet. So I do.
I think Excel comes with the optimizer, it's a little bit clunky, when you want to do it, when you want to have your answers in a minute, it's kind of difficult to follow that approach. Commercial, I mean, there are many wonderful enterprise level packages. So it's all a matter of personal preference, and I have used all the big ones, and I currently use Alex, which I like very much because it's very well integrated with Windows. So it's all a matter of your personal preference and how what you like the best. But you can go for best mix, any of those enterprise packages. And one of the good things about it is that previously these packages used to be very expensive. They were out of reach for anyone except a large enterprise. Today, they have pricing schemes that allow them to be used even at an individual level. They're a lot more affordable today than they were in the past. And one caution that I would say is sometimes, some people come up with software with good intentions and all that, but if they don't put enough effort to keep them updated, they will go out of business very fast. And then if you invest in one of them, when I say invest, it's not just the money, but more the time that you invest in a software, because then you need to come up with this matrices, you need to input them and all that. You get them invested in, your time is invested in it. And then if they go out of business, then you will be in trouble. So it's best to stick with the more established players because you know that they're going to be there, and that's my only advice.
Albert?
My only comment is, I mean, I have 4 major clients. Each client uses a different software. But my main point I always say is that the data is only as good as what you put into that database. And so at the end of the day, like Victor said, I mean, it's what's really important that people don't understand is that every batch is different. You have to really do your nears or whatever it is, and formulate accordingly.
And I also add to that, because even not only the ingredient composition, right? And the more information we have on a specific ingredient, amino acids, minerals, vitamins, fatty acids, toxin levels, the better. You said, like, your last sentence was puzzle, right? So the more we have, more pieces we have, so more quicker we can solve the puzzle.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think it's the last question from audience, Muhammad Ashraf Malik, about the enzyme. What is the practical role of exogenous enzymes in aqua feed? Okay, this is kind of my topic, but I will let you answer.
Albert, you want to go first?
Okay, no, I mean, just if we follow the lead of the poultry sector and other sectors, for sure, enzymes is part of the future. In that, if it's not digestible by the particular species that we're growing, we can either add enzymes to the diet to help to improve its digestibilities, or we can actually add enzymes to the ingredient and ferment it, for example, to improve its digestibility. With aquaculture, the problem is how we apply it. And so if you have a facility where you can top dress your feed with heat sensitive ingredients, then we have a good way, but it's just because enzymes are proteins, and most proteins are denatured by some of the temperatures that we use during conventional pelleting or extrusion. So I really think it's part of the future in terms of environment and in terms of improving the digestibility of the ingredients we use.
Yep. Dr. Suresh, we have 2 minutes. But 30 seconds.
I mean, the application of enzymes is proven in livestock. In aquaculture, the challenge, Albert outlined it, being heat stable means that the granular enzymes, do not work in the feed, largely because they'll be lost, by the time it's pelleted or extruded. So top coating with liquid enzymes is the way to go. And but the technology in doing that, is pretty complex, and also there is a high cost, when you want to put a top coating system. The investment levels are high, and but then we need to work out, we need to determine if that also works out. There is another issue, is the water, the solubility in the water. So if you top dress it and then put it into the water, is it going to stay on the feed or going to be lost to the environment? That's also something that needs to be done. And I'm working on that area. I don't have definite answers. Hopefully, within my third quarter, I can get an answer. That's what I hope.
There's always a trade-off, right? Top coating, we may lose some enzymes in the water, but also when you put in the mixer, then we lose some enzymes, but there's a possibility the enzyme can act during the manufacturing process.
Yeah.
Changing some of the protein profile, or there are some studies, published studies on that, or even in case of phytase, there are some phosphorus availability increases more than post-pelleting. So there are trade-offs for both, but a lot more works need to be done in terms of application and use and type of enzymes as well.
Yeah.
Yes, Albert. We have.
That's why what we need is that we need a presentation on the enzyme, Kabir.
Okay.
For somebody to explain it, and
We'll have that. But final question is about attractant. A lot of queries about attractant, and farmers like to smell the fish meal. But what about the species? What about the animals, right? And I'm referring to one of your paper, and I think it was Global Aquaculture Advocate that published long time ago. You tested in shrimp. But what is your general comment, Dr. Suresh, about the types of attractant can be used for animal, not for the farmers, okay? For animals.
Okay.
Yes.
I think, you know, we did some work, you know, while I was in Brunei, and it got published in Aquaculture, I think. You know, where we were looking at it, and then what we found as a common denominator among the ingredients that have an effect on the animal is the low molecular weight peptides. You know, peptides that are, you know, below 1,000 Daltons, you know, 1 kilodalton. They are very, very good attractants. So I would say that, you know, that is one primary criteria. So when you look at all these ingredients and then, you know, look at the peptide site, that can be a very good predictor of, you know, what can be a good attractant. And we looked at different factors like soluble protein and, you know, different things. But this was one keen thing that we saw, you know, anything that has whether it's the krill meal or squid meal, you know, we saw that happening. So,
Dr. Tekan, Albert?
No, I mean, at the practical level, hydrolysates, obviously, hydrolysates are beautiful to supply that. They also have an acid effect, you know, which has another different effect on the gut microbiome. But like Victor said, you know, you have, as an attractant, they work very well. And then the other part is that you also have different types of hydrolysates, you know, and krill again is a good example, and it has many soluble amino acids there as well that really work as feeding attractants.
Specific amino acids can also help, which is available in your fish solubles. There's one question from Dr. Zuri American, as you know, about least cost formulation for shrimp based on as amino acid requirements. Can we do least cost formulation for shrimp based on amino acid requirements?
why not?
We
Absolutely.
do.
I mean, that's how we do it. I mean, that's how we do it, you know. But really, the formulas are driven by lysine and methionine, I mean, sulfur amino acids. And sometimes, you know, threonine, but normally, you know, when these two requirements are met, then everything else falls in place. So the focus is really on this. So it's really simple. You don't have to, I mean, maybe Zurida's question was related to maybe an ideal protein concept or something like that. But formulating, you know, doing a least cost formulation based on digestible amino acids is what is being done widely.
Albert?
No, I'd agree. I mean, most large feed companies already do that. The small companies don't. They do it on a total amino acid basis because there's very little published information out there that they can use. But
Okay.
the large companies are already doing this.
So I think the last question, it is a question, comments, or a true irony, what is the industry is facing now. We don't need to, I think, discuss. We don't have much time. We have already past 10 minutes, but actually 5 minutes, I would say. It was like from Mr. Waliur Rahman Faisal, I think. So nutrition or science gone very far, but farmers are not getting the price.
Price? You mean, did you say the price?
Right, farmers are not getting the price of their product. Farm gate price is low, right? But we have done a lot of nutrition studies. Don't you think it is a very concern, like high concern, should be high concern for us? Because what are you doing for? No, like this is.
So the question, if I understand it right, is asking there's so much of knowledge available, but the prices of the feeds are higher than they should be. Is that
Yeah,
the question?
farmers are getting their profit, right? There's zero profit, or they're farming at a loss in some cases.
This is going to be very, very geographic specific. It's maybe, in some countries, the feed industry, aqua feed industry is early stages of development that you see, a trend like that. But then once, the capacity is established, I feel that very quickly that capacity expands. In other words, many people jump into the business, and then they start offering the feed, and quickly, the level of competition that exists doesn't allow for pricing the product very high, and extremely high, I would say. And so that question could be probably related to the geography from which the person who's asking the question is coming from. But I don't see that being the case. I mean, you see that cost of ingredients have increased, and to some extent, you also, the lack of knowledge, sometimes is causing a higher price than it should be, because we simply do not know. So we want to be on the safer side, and maybe sort of provide certain nutrients that are probably not necessary for the farming system. And but that all would happen in the early stages of development, and eventually, it should be all coming to, a level at which, you simply cannot price the product, beyond a certain level. Otherwise, you will be out of the market.
I will let Albert close, but I will just be after my opinion about that. The farmers, I think farmers are not stupid. Like some farmers, they adjust and adapt themselves to the situation. They can switch a species. They can find a different way of market their product. Maybe like they can go to live fish market. I saw one farmer in Malaysia. He was selling his fish to hospitals, getting a better price, right? So tilapia farmer. So farmers can adapt, and who the farmers who cannot adapt will die off eventually, right? And we will see the consolidation of the market. Albert, the last question and closing.
But may I have one point just before that, before Albert does. My advice to the feed manufacturers is to provide choices for the farmers. In other words, you provide a feed, a high performing feed, which is obviously going to be expensive, but also provide them a cheaper alternative. Maybe 2 or 3 choices, that they can choose from. And these obviously would be differing in terms of the quality of the feed and the price of the feed and the performance of the feed also. And but I've typically seen that, so when you look at it, the farmer is going to spend the same amount of money to produce the per kg of feed. Per kg of fish. He's going to spend the money, same amount of money, because you're using a cheaper product which gives a higher FCR. So if you look at how much I've spent on per kg of feed per fish, it's all the same. So, but then invariably, what I see is these premium feeds are chosen only by 20% of the farmers. 80% of them, go for cheaper. They have their own reason, but I feel that no matter what, the feed company has to give the farmer to choose from. They have to give them the choice. That's sort of
education and the numbers, right? Education and the numbers. You use this feed, your FCR will be this. At the end. So the education is also important. Albert, closing. We have. Sorry.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, we are here to serve the farmer. If the farmer fails, we sell no feed. So obviously we have to, a good feed company will have different types of feeds depending on the farming system or the money in the farmer's pocket. But the problem for us in Asia is that we do have to import our ingredients mainly. And the prices, especially now during COVID, we have to pay in dollars to buy them. And so the prices are increasing. But this is not only for aquaculture, it's also for poultry, for hogs and other species. The smart companies are like the ones that Victor is working with, that have their own innovation, R&D, where they can do today's work for tomorrow. But also we have to do this, the farmers have to do the same. It's not just that we buy a feed and we use it. A good farmer will also have part of his or her farm where they do R&D with different types of feeds, with different types of feed management, with different types of probiotics. You understand? It's like not only feed companies, but also farmers, we have to try and reduce our costs per kilo of production. So it works both ways.
So thank you so much. I will ask Mumjai to come if she is around. But thank you, Dr. Suresh, for your time and support with the, I think, to bring the audience. I think we had quite a good number from all continents. Normally we have from all over the world audiences. And thank you, Albert, as well. Thank you, our audience, and the good questions coming, keep coming. And I think we would continue the interaction. And thank you, Pumjai, for all the support in the back.
Thank you.
And sorry for the glitches at the beginning. We tried to set ourselves up properly, but yes, but we will always be better. And wait for the next year, in the new year. Happy New Year to all from Aquaculture Nutritionists Network, as well as from Jefo Nutrition in Canada. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Suresh. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Pumjai. And thank you, audiences. Thank you all the questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.